So just to give everybody a quick overview of what you're going to see on PrimeSupplier, this tool was developed to allow NASA to compare suppliers with industry benchmarks so that they could really have a normalized way of determining who was doing well and who wasn't doing well. Obviously, the goal was to improve enterprise-wide awareness of supplier viability, and then to take that a step further and simulate the demand pressures that may influence supplier viability and liquidity. We haven't talked too much about that yet, but you'll see in the tool how NASA is now able to simulate different scenarios and figure out how far out in the future it can push spending without affecting the supplier liquidity. They wanted a way to move towards enterprise-wide collaborative demand planning. We talked a little bit about that, and obviously be able to target those suppliers that are at risk now and then ultimately prevent suppliers from failing. So how does it do all of this? Well, it operates off of a patent-pending configurable weighting algorithm that Mike and his team developed, which generates an economic stability indicator for each supplier. And that's kind of the heart of the tool. And that economic stability indicator incorporates a myriad of different parameters and data points and business rules and allows you to quickly get a sense of a given supplier's viability in relationship to the rest of the supplier base. One thing that's important about the way the tool works is it gives you a normalized or apples-to-apples comparison of suppliers. If you think about how you would compare a large multinational supplier, publicly held, to a private mom-and-pop supplier, which may be just as important to your manufacturing process, it's difficult to do that without some type of normalization process, and so PrimeSupplier takes care of that. You might be thinking, well, all this kind of sounds like some of the stuff you can get from tools like Dun & Bradstreet. The things that are fundamentally different about PrimeSupplier are, number one, it allows you to combine both financial data, being things like PE ratios and C ratios and revenues and revenue diversity, as well as the demand data that's coming from your internal sources. When is that next purchase order coming for this supplier? What is it for, and how much is it for? And then once you've got that data in there so you can see what things look like today, Mike will show you how you can really take it to the next level by simulating different changing demand scenarios. Mike's going to show you the simulation console, which is your top-level view of PrimeSupplier, of all your suppliers at a glance. It lets you simulate some very high-level changes in your programs or product lines. And then he'll drill down into the financial simulation dashboard, which looks at the financial side of the equation. And then he'll go into the programmatic simulation dashboard, which looks at the demand side of the equation. And you'll see the word programmatic used in PrimeSupplier. That's a word that's very kind of government-centric. And a commercial organization might call it a product or a product line or even a project or something of that nature. So all that kind of terminology is really configurable in the tool. So with that, let me turn it over to Mike, if you all will bear with me for a moment.
Let me give you a general description of what you're viewing and then get into the details of how the algorithm works and how the model works. Very simple. As Karen had mentioned, there's a top-level general overview, if you will, or general console that is fed by both the financial module as well as the programmatic, or, like as Karen again said, product line or enterprise information. Now, I mentioned before that we were also considering or watching critical single source suppliers. So we broke up the module or the graph view into two fundamental shots, if you will. One being critical single source, which is the screen that you're seeing here. And then down below, you'll see the various, all the suppliers that I'd also want to consider in a specific program. So to the left, and by the way, the programs here, I only have listed 4. It's not limited to 4. You could have 1, 2, or 10. The model is easily or adaptable to your needs, and it's just a matter of loading the information and the data. And essentially what you're looking at is, of course, in this case, I've got shuttle listed, and I'm playing with a top-level aggregate of the data variables that are going in to determine that economic stability indicator itself. So if I was to, for example, play with the end of shuttle in this case, or it could be end of the product offering, you'll notice that based on all of these data points, and as I move out the last flight, the model in a sense is showing and reflecting, for example, those various impacts to the supplier stability. Now, on the bottom you'll see a score, 100, 200, 300, and on up. It's the general idea here, the premise is, instead of doing a shotgun blast, what I want to do is weed out and set the sights on those key suppliers that, based on these variables, will show a potential risk. And that's what the numbers are intended to do. The numbers aren't going to be static. They're going to be adjusting and moving according to your situation or economic times and or your programmatic influences. So again, I've said before, it's just a top-level view. If you wanted to determine where your risks are associated with the various projects, it takes into consideration, as I said before, those cross-element or cross-program impacts. As a good example, if let's say, for example, the Apache helicopter also used, or suppliers also were applied into shuttle, then by watching the Apache program, let's say that they were going to expedite the termination or extend the program of Apache, that's going to have an impact, or could have an impact on my program. Maybe it's a stretch of an example. Obviously, NASA doesn't watch or manage the Apache, but I get the general idea. As I scroll down,
for a commercial organization like those programs that you have on the left-hand side, your Apache and Shuttle and so on, those would be their different product lines, most likely.
That's correct.
Correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be Caterpillar front-end loader, it could be gensets or what have you.
And if I have a supplier who's showing up in the red, is the idea that I would move business away from them?
No, again, it's like I said before, it's making sure or ensuring that we keep them healthy and viable. So it could be where, and this is where I'll show in the programmatic model, that what would we have to do to ensure, in this case, Godfrey, again, these are fictitious company names, or if Ham Sandwich wanted to, we wanted to improve Ham Sandwich's viability, what would we have to do in terms of either A, expediting that procurement order, or collectively, collaboratively, what would we do to make sure that product line is viable? So, give you an example. Here's Abazar, which is basically a simple drop-down menu of various suppliers within your product offering or program, and simply point and click. It's very easy to show. Again, these are all fictitious data, so mind you, if you're looking at subsystem, just because in this case it says RSRM, it doesn't mean that it actually is there. It's filler. So I could simply, for example, I was using, Aerostrat, for example. Abazar is a good example. It'll give me the product line, cage code, or the location of that production is actually happening at, the physical location, or the geographic position. It'll also show or identify the program impact, the subsystem, the purchase order. Now, let me go back if I can. I keep mentioning what I call functional capabilities. A supplier is going to have what I call 3 primary functional capabilities. They're going to either manufacture, they're going to be a repair facility, or they're going to do failure analysis, tear down, test, and evaluate, or TT&E, or a combination of any of the above. The model takes this all in consideration and weighs appropriately based on what the functional capability of that supplier is supporting your program. So in this case, Abazar is only doing manufacturing, so that's going to weigh a little bit heavier than, let's say, if they were going to support with TT&E or failure analysis. It's much more difficult and more expensive to source a secondary supplier or manufacturer, it would to find somebody to do engineering or to do failure analysis.
Mike, we had a question from the audience. If you can scroll back up to the top part of your screen where you show your overview of all the suppliers. I think we addressed this, but just to make sure, the question was the numbers across the bottom of the chart. Those are the economic stability indicators for this particular point in time and simulation scenario. And Mike, you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, that's correct. It's what it's reflecting is the weighted value of all 31 data variables into the model.
Great.
It's a total score, basically, is what it is.
Great. So when you've got a supplier that you want to further examine, you can drill down into the programmatic side of things or the financial side of things, right?
Right. And, this product is, obviously still ready for more further development. I could envision, for example, clicking on a particular line here, popping into more details of the supplier. I can also envision like a financial news network has on the television, a ticker scroll on top, identifying various changes in economic stability indicator scores. Understand that this model is not a real-time feed. That's the next evolutionary step that this model needs to take. The value here and why it's ready for patenting is the math behind, or the intelligence behind the model. That's the value. The data feed, that's to some degree easy, a little bit of a time effort to do, but it can be done very, I would imagine, very easily.
Let's go on to the financial side of things and look at the financial dashboard if we can.
Okay. Yeah, I know we're pushing time. Okay, real quick, I know we're short on time. I'll try to do my best here. What this is, let me explain the general screenshot here. Again, the supplier name, the caution warning of obviously red, yellow, green, and the yellow in this particular case of atomized is a weight of simply the financial variables that you're looking at here, primarily the current ratio, which is the current liabilities and current assets. That's just essential barometer to say if a company can pay their bills or not. Fairly basic financials or economics. The price-earnings ratio, which is simply, to me, an understanding of company valuation or what market expectations could be. It also is a good indicator of their ability to leverage additional financing options. And net profit margin. And all these are compared against industry benchmarks. Now you can't, and the model doesn't take just one of these variables into consideration. It looks at all three proportion to each other. In other words, if I have a current ratio that's below 1, which means I'm having difficulty paying my bills, and if my net profit margin is high and my price earnings is low, then that's going to tell me that let's reverse the other. Let's say net profit margin is low and price earnings is high. That's telling me that the company is a little overvalued. They may take a hit a little bit from the financial part of it. Now, the model itself, for example, I'll pick on Aerostrat. Here's a case where I've got a current ratio of below 1 that's showing up as red. Oh, let me, if I can, I apologize. Let me go through the rest of what you're saying. You got other revenues. This is basically a percentage of what other business that particular the supplier has relative to the type of or percentage of business that we provide them. So in this case, we're less than 1% of their business. Now, the idea here is if I was to, let's say, expedite an order, what would it have? How would it take, or how many days would it take, and how much to bring that current ratio back to 1, or a situation to where it might be considered green. Now, current ratios, under this current economic situation, I know that the benchmark has been raised to 2.0, I believe it is. I'm still using 1. The math behind it, I prefer 1. It's just, to me, fundamental economics using 1 as a benchmark. Now, you mentioned the mapping part of it, and this is something that I do want to expand further. but it's truly dependent on, I think, the customer who subscribes to it, whether they want this feature or, of course, wants to expand it to their own internal mapping capability or supply chain mapping. It's very simple. In this particular case, we have our own industrial base interface map, and it's just a simple link like that. Again, further development would take that directly into a Google map and taking it further to show risks and things of that nature. The financial connection obviously takes you directly to the finances, or the Google Finance in this particular case. Now, the programmatic.
My question before we leave the financial side.
Okay.
You talked about C ratio and some differences. You know, that value is changing a little bit from an industry standpoint. Things like that would be configurable in the tool, right? If I believe it should be 2.0, I can set that up in the tool myself.
It can. Right? Yes, it can.
Okay, great.
Very, very easily, actually. It depends on how tight you want to monitor the activity. Now, this is where you're getting into the programmatic, and let me explain a little bit here, too. It's very busy. And again, I listed just a couple of subsystems. It's not limited to just what you're seeing here. And you've got a simple supplier stability indicator based on this particular airframe that this particular supplier supports. You're looking at, again, the functional capabilities, manufacturing, repair, failure analysis, days without that capability, or when it's basically counting the gap days. Here's the day of until the new PO, last known purchase order value, some of the maintenance demand rate information or data that if you have it available, is an excellent add-in to the stability indicator. And, of course, in this case, contract value for that particular supplier as it supports that various project element. And these are, from an agency perspective, now granted, I can't repeat this enough, this is bogus data in terms of what you're seeing. It's too sensitive. We couldn't share, for example, we can't share contract value. However, it is public information. So a lot of this information, to be surprised, is public and can easily be loaded in, even though it's listed as programmatic. It's the procurement activity. So, for example, if I wanted to change dates with manufacturing, you can see various effects of my change. And it's simply showing up red and green. So you could, take it down to various levels, and you can see, of course, what's happening with the stability indicator. And, of course, identifying how many days you can go before a particular situation may actually turn red. And these are all based on, again, that data set of 30-plus parameters. Karen, I tried to expedite. I know we were...
Yes. As far as data sources, Mike, so it sounds like some of this data you would feed in from a publicly available data source, and other data, obviously the demand data would be coming out of things like your ERP system, your purchasing system, that type of thing. Is that kind of how you envision somebody gathering all this information and feeding it in?
Well, the majority of the information is public information. And yes, to answer your question, yes, it is. It's an excellent SRM, or supplier relationship management application, I believe. I believe when it's fed real-time data, absolutely an excellent ERP or, to some degree, MRP application. And it would be a nice, I would think, add-on to a full product suite dealing with supply chain management.